All right, Isaiah 17. And I'm going to apologize up front because we got lawnmowers going in the background. But style points come from an added level of difficulty. So let's call this chapter The Work of Their Hands. In a chapter that reminds us of the future for Syria and Israel as they have banded together to come against Judah. And as God has said before, the end isn't good. And this chapter is going to remind us as the first 3 verses talk about an oracle concerning Damascus. Behold, Damascus, the capital of Syria at that time, will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins, an event that will become the anchor point for the rest of the chapter that is going to seem to unfold in a series of in that day statements. The first of which being in verse 4, which will say, in that day, the glory of Jacob will be brought low. And I'm not super familiar with these prophecies, but Jacob is the term that seems to have been used in this chapter and in previous times to refer to Israel, the northern 10 kingdoms, the way in which they are now glorious, but that is about to shift as they try to, once again, mount an attack with Syria against Judah. It's going to talk about the way in which verse 7 will say, in that day, man will look to his maker, because once again, after their prosperity has been brought low, they're going to start looking for answers, and they're going to stop looking for answers in the idols. Once again, the idols that they typically attributed to their success, but will not answer them in the day of stress because they're simply not real. As verse 9 will go on to say, the way in which in that day their strong cities will be like deserted places, and using a familiar term to describe them, they will be a desolation. Why? We'll find out in verse 10 where it says, for you have forgotten the God of your salvation, as it will go on in the final 3 verses, verses 12 through 14, to basically say, this is the portion of those who loot us, reminding us once again that God has already prophesied that the union between Israel and Syria will not be able to get loot. The thing that stood out to me most in this chapter, quite possibly going back to verses 7 and 8 that remind us, in that day, verse 8, he will not look to the altars, the work of his hands, and he will not look on what his own fingers have made. Reminding me that that term idols comes up probably more in the book of Isaiah than any other book except Ezekiel. This quick word search that I've done says it comes up 25 times in the book of Isaiah alone and 39 in the book of Ezekiel, with that phrase, the work of their hands, having already appeared here in the book of Isaiah in chapter 2, verse 8, where it says, their land is filled with idols. They bow down to the work of their hands, to what their own fingers have made. Giving us a chance to see once again the way in which that whole concept of idolatry can seem old and irrelevant until we substitute the term images for idols, and we get a chance to see the way in which we create images of people and things that we give way too much credit, only to realize the same thing that these nations learned thousands of years ago, that when we most need them, they will not be able to help us because the images that we've created just aren't real.